Welcome to NC Spin Perspectives, opinions from thought leaders in North Carolina. Today we're talking with Dr. Andy Taylor, who is a professor and head of the Political Science Department at North Carolina State University. The Tea Party, the ultra-right conservative wing of the Republican Party. How significant is that in North Carolina? Can you see any evidences where it really has made that much of a difference in elections?
One of the sort of consequences, of course, of the Republican Party being large, sophisticated winning elections is that it starts to have its own internal divisions.
Schisms.
Yes, and I think it's fairly clear that there are several in the Republican Party. It's interesting if you think back to May and the U.S. Senate Republican primary. A lot of people were talking about the three principal candidates as representing three different factions within today's North Carolina Republican Party, with Speaker Tom Tillis, the establishment candidate, Greg Brannon representing the Tea Party, a more sort of economic libertarian wing of the party, and then Mark Harris, a more sort of social conservative, traditional North Carolina conservative wing. And I think that was a fairly accurate description. There clearly are competing factions within the Republican Party. That's a problem that any party gets when it gets close to majority status. And I don't think those things have worked themselves out, and they will probably continue to happen as the Republican Party remains a viable large party in the state. It's a question of whether Republicans can manage those internal divisions enough to win general elections.
Given the Supreme Court's recent Citizens United decision, are political parties just archaic? Do they serve any? I mean, it used to be that you were the standard bearer of a party. The party helped raise money. The party helped do grassroots efforts to get you elected. We don't see any of that now. Are political parties archaic?
Well, certainly changes in the campaign finance regime have been a challenge to regular political parties. You remember back before the 2002 Bicker or McCain-Feingold campaign finance legislation at the federal level, that there was this thing called soft money, and the large contributions from donors that we're seeing at the moment going into what generally called super PACs could go to the parties. In 2002, legislation stopped that, and now, of course, since Citizens United, these large contributions have gone into these non-partisan vehicles that are clearly and this helps the party, strong party argument a little, stronger party argument a little bit, clearly are aligned with the party. The law prevents them from having formal coordination with the party and candidates, but you know, we know who the Republican super PACs are. We know what the Democratic super PACs are. If you look at the people involved, and I'm not just talking about the fundraisers, I'm talking about the administrators. Those people have grown up within either party organization. So on the surface, it does look as though this new campaign finance regime is hurting the traditional understanding of what we have of political parties. But it's not quite as bad for parties as it seems. It's really going on. It's still Republican super PACs, Republican financiers and Democratic.
These independent expenditure groups, though, Andy, we don't know who they are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know who's giving money to them.
And that's the real problem. I mean, the problem, I don't think the problem is for the political parties so much as it is for transparency and accountability. I think a lot of people who are even supportive of what super PACs do, and that is really not having limitations on contributions and expenditures, feel that one way around that problem, and perhaps the best way, since it's very hard to sort of keep your tabs on every dollar, is to have transparency instead of having regulation.
And the court essentially told Congress that they needed to do this,
right,
in the Citizens United and subsequent decisions. Now, the Congress hasn't taken any action, which has led to a movement now to invoke Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution and to have the states call for a constitutional convention to discuss and resolve that very issue. Is that going to go anywhere?
Well, I don't think that will go anywhere directly. It may create or generate a certain amount of pressure that will lead to changes. One of I think the best situation which change will come about is after a presidential election. The federal campaign finance regime that governs congressional elections is still somewhat working, somewhat operable. For presidential elections,
right.
It's clearly, I don't think the correct term is broken. It's just irrelevant. We saw that beginning in the late 1990s when candidates were, during the nomination process, were refusing matching funds.
Right.
And now, of course, beginning in 2008 with then Senator Obama, and now, but with both major party candidates in 2012, we see it in the general election, where they just sort of say no thank you to the federal grant. That regime is clearly broken, and there may come a time when even people who don't really have a problem with money in politics, they have a problem with that other point which you say, which is the opacity of the process and the lack of accountability, will say, look, it's clear that regulation on contribution and spending limits are problematic. They're difficult to enforce. There may be First Amendment issues, but we still can have a system which helps reinforce democracy so long as we make sure that it's fully transparent, and so that the electorate can understand where each candidate, where each political party is getting its money from.
Thank you, Andy Taylor. Always good to get your insight.